Hello everybody, welcome to Tuesdays with Fatih. Let's start by giving credit where credit is due. The hardworking people of Studio Ghibli eat ramen noodles to work more and deliver these amazing movies. But this movie specifically is, in my opinion, the deepest Miyazaki/Studio Ghibli movie that ever existed. On the surface, it's a mix of Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke, but it has a few elements from other Studio Ghibli movies, and in many ways, The Boy and the Heron reflects Miyazaki's filmography. In a deeper sense, it is truly a display of artistic mastery from Miyazaki, how he interweaved different styles and motifs from his past work and, more importantly, his own life. Let's dive into it. It's been quite a long time since I've seen a Ghibli film, especially a more fantastical to reality balanced one. For example, My Neighbor Totoro went a bit over my head. It's also been 10 years since Studio Ghibli released any movies. Since then, I've been invested in Western movies and Western ideas of what a plot should look like. And I feel like there's a lot to love and appreciate about The Boy and the Heron once you let go of those preconceptions. It was relatively easier for me, having extensively studied the text Howl's Moving Castle in my university years, as well as watching other Studio Ghibli movies until this one, such as Spirited Away and Kiki's Delivery Service. There's a part of me that knows you're going to love this movie. Perhaps seeing someone talk about the movie and the context so passionately will inspire you to go and see it. This video will validate and affirm a few of the elements some viewers may have been feeling uncertain about. Spoiler alert, there's quite a few up ahead, so you've been warned. Let's start with the name of the movie, The Boy and the Heron. Did you know that herons in Native American culture present an ability to progress and resolve? The legs of the heron represent that you don't need giant pillars to remain stable, but must be able to stand on your own. This relates to how Mahito must learn to stand on his own without his mom, and the heron showed him the path. Some natives will carry around heron totems to follow their unique path of wisdom and self-determination, which I think is interesting because there are totems in the movie, and Mahito himself carries totems around and has them protect him. I only know this information because I read about it at school. I guess school is good for something, but I think if you look closer, there are more cultural symbols in the movie that you wouldn't know unless you did research. The fact that they chose Mahito's guide to be a heron and how well it fits into what herons represent for native people feel like it just can't be coincidence. There's a lot of value in the movie, especially in the pacing of the plot. Liquid would be such an appropriate way to describe it. The plot slides from one thing to the next without a lot of explicit acknowledgement of what just happened or what was just revealed. In some ways, that makes sense for Mahito. You can see how much his mother's death numbs him. He does not react to anything, and he does not show explicit emotion in the way that a lot of other young Miyazaki protagonists did. But I love that he showed genuine discomfort when his stepmom made him feel her pregnant belly. Like the idea of new life made him visibly sick because he was still processing the concept of death. So picking apart the places where Mahito shows emotion is where you can find the character growth that otherwise isn't explicit. For example, losing his mother, crying when he reads her journal, meeting her younger self, and being able to let her go. Also, being uncomfortable with pregnancy, then seeing beauty and preciousness in the Wara Wara, then being angry when those unborn souls die at Himi's hands. That's how he processes and eventually accepts having his new sibling. I also felt that Miyazaki was addressing his struggle to pass on the torch to a new generation, but I also feel like he's accepting it, coming to an understanding that each generation inherits a different world, each with its struggles and traumas that shape their dreams. You see this with the old man, looking for a successor and finding none, and then finally seeing all that he built collapse around him. When the tower crumbled, I became emotional with the realization that Miyazaki was abandoning the concept of holding on to a legacy and allowing the new generation to have their voice and to interpret his work however they would. I think the fantasy world in this movie actually represents Miyazaki's life's work, the fantastic realm of creativity that draws from the real world but transforms everything it touches and sends inspiration back out to the real world. And this is a movie about all of that ending. It's basically him saying goodbye. If you watch the documentary on Miyazaki, Never Ending Man, he talks about how one of his great sadnesses is that as a perfectionist control freak, he never made Studio Ghibli into something that could function without him and carry his legacy without him, the way that, say, Disney did. Throughout his life as a creator, he has faced two self-contradictions. One is his existence as an anti-war person who admires airplanes as weapons of war and depicts them in a beautiful and cool way. The other is that he made his films in the hope of bringing children into contact with nature, but instead he has created a social phenomenon in which children repeatedly watch his films in their rooms. These are the reasons for his quote-unquote cursed dream and his introspection. Also, he's lost so many friends when he became an animator turned director that he declared he would never do again. But he was hooked. His history of abandonment towards his son Goro is also an important part of his artistry and self-contradiction. He despises his family, telling himself that this is a film for his son. I'm not criticizing this personally. No human being can be perfect, but some run away from that fact and some face it head on. And I think Miyazaki is on the latter, and I think that is why his films are more beautiful. To me, this movie felt like a love letter from Miyazaki to his audience. He's telling us to create beautiful worlds untainted by malice. That block Mahito kept at the end is his studio and his movies, a powerful reminder to all of us. The sad thing is, this might be one of the last traditionally animated films we'll ever see again. We can only hope there will be another filmmaker as great as the old master Miyazaki. And while people will forget Studio Ghibli, represented by the collapsing tower and the boy and the heron, whether it be quickly or slowly over time, as the world no longer exists, being an anomaly in space and time. If it doesn't exist now, it never really existed at all, except for Mahito, who holds on to a keepsake, a small part of that legacy. Maybe a tiny bit of optimism and hope from Miyazaki. Just the fact that the man popped out of retirement just to make this is a testament to this idea. It's almost as if it's one last goodbye, criticism, and a roast to Studio Ghibli, and maybe even the world of anime today. And this is something that I can truly appreciate. A story with multiple layers, simple but also complicated, just amazing. If you have not watched The Boy and the Heron yet, please do. I strongly recommend you watch it with the autobiographical nature of characters in mind. It doesn't really matter if you watch it for Miyazaki's message or for the story itself. I think it's genuinely an outstanding, beautiful piece of art. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Tuesdays with Fatih, and you heard it on Heads and Tails. Let me know what you thought about the movie and my review of it.